Being resilient means understanding and bouncing back from life's difficult events. Everybody goes through ups and downs throughout their journey. Some are hard to take in and some are easy. No matter who you are or where you are, you will always go through something. July 26, 2020 was the day everything went wrong. I woke up to the sound of my brother Arthur pounding on the keyboard, making an ungodly sound. I did not really think much of it since I took a video of him with the caption, "Sounds just like Beethoven." I sent the video to a group chat with my family in it. Ha 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 ha. I can't believe it's really Beethoven. Those were the replies I got from my family. My nephew Jacob was staying at our house at the time. I went into the kitchen to get something to eat and I saw Jacob sitting on the stool eating a bowl of cereal. I was so confused because I knew my sister was at work and there was nobody around to get it for him. I asked, "Who got you cereal?" "Grandpa did." I looked into the dining room to see my dad working on his computer. "Your face is a mess, I said as I helped him down. He ran away, only dressed in a shirt and a diaper. I chased after him into the family room to watch a movie. I put his favorite movie, Dino Trucks, on. He sat on the couch while he watched it. I decided to find something to eat in the kitchen. I had a donut left over from yesterday and a glass of water. I opened the back door and stood on the porch barefoot in the sun. The weather was very warm and sunny. Tiny barefoot feet stood right next to mine, so I looked down to see him creepily smiling at me. I made an even creepier face that made him laugh. He pulled me by my hand to help him on the bench swing that I had just painted red because we decided to redo our porch. We sat for a while until we both got very hot and decided to go back inside. At that time, I saw my younger sister in the kitchen looking in the fridge. Perfect timing. Your turn to watch Jacob, I smiled and ran upstairs to my bed. I share a room with both my sisters, so it's very hot and crowded in our room, so it took me a while to get comfortable. I went onto my phone and watched a K-drama called What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. The episodes are an hour long each, so they are very time-consuming. I finished one episode and got a little bored, so I went onto YouTube. I am very obsessed with K-pop, so I was watching Try Not to Laugh challenges and iconic moments from the K-pop groups. While I was watching the videos, I heard my mom's door open and I could hear her coming into my room. "What you doing?" she asked. "Nothing, just watching YouTube videos." "Okay, well, I'm going downstairs," she said, walking away from my room. A couple of minutes passed and I could hear Arthur going into my parents' room to watch music on my parents' TV. I did not do anything about it since my brother did this every day. Some more time goes by and I start to panic about the smell of something burning. At first I thought it was my mom cooking something, so I headed downstairs. "What's that smell?" I asked my mom, who was making more food for Jacob. "I think something's melting in the dishwasher," she said as she opened it. Nothing in the dishwasher was burning or melting. "Arthur," I said, looking straight into my mom's eyes. I ran upstairs and the smell got worse. As I got to the top of the stairs, I went straight into my parents' room. I could not believe my eyes. Arthur was walking out of the room. I looked behind him to see my mom's pillow on fire. I yelled at him to get out and I shut the door behind him, not knowing he had locked it before it was closed. I ran downstairs and yelled at the top of my lungs, "Mom, your bed's on fire." I picked up Jacob from the stool and ran out to the back door to tell my dad. My dad had headphones on, so he heard nothing. He was drilling a loose piece of wood that was on the bench. My mom got his attention, and he dropped his drill and ran so fast up the stairs. My entire body was shaking, and I started to cry. I heard my dad break down the door because he did not know if there was any animal or anybody still inside. My mom was following my dad as I took Jacob and Abby outside in the front. My neighbor Dustin was outside at the time. He realized that I was crying and telling Abby and Jacob to go over to his house, so he got his hose and went straight into our house, and he was telling my mom to get out. I turned around and looked back at my house to see my parents and Dustin on the front porch. I was the only one who had my phone on me, so I had to call 911. 911, what's your emergency? 3443 North Columbine Avenue. My mom's bed is on fire. I could not even think or talk straight. I was so frightened. And what is your name? My name is Lillian Borelli. I saw my brother run away while I was on the call, and the dispatcher was asking me questions, but I could not understand him. Lillian, I need you to calm down, he said. I'm sorry, my brother just ran away. I bawled my eyes out. How many people were in the house? My mom, my nephew, my younger sister, my younger brother, and my older brother, and my dad was outside at the time, but he went upstairs. Okay, Lillian, can you tell me their names? Claire, Abby, Jacob, Anthony, Arthur, and Rick. I put the phone down and I noticed I was standing on my neighbor's driveway. I put the phone back up to my ear. Lillian, the fire trucks are coming. Can you hear them? Yes, I stood back and realized that they were coming to my house. There were 5 fire trucks, 2 police cars, 1 ambulance, and 1 fire chief. It all did not feel real. The sirens were so loud all my neighbors were on their driveway. At that moment, I needed to find my brother, so I ran on the blazing hot road barefoot. Lillian, come back, Dustin had yelled right before I turned the corner. I stopped and looked down the street to see if I could see him. The tears in my eyes made it hard to see everything. Dustin and 2 police officers walked up behind me and told me to go to his house and stay with Abby and Jacob. My husband is taking his car to go look for your brother. Do you want to go with him? Another neighbor asked with her son next to her while I walked back home. No, I just want to go back home. I did not want to go anywhere. I just wanted to see if my family was okay and where they were. I got back to my house and I saw firefighters climbing on a ladder to the second level of my house through the window. I had seen my family coming out of the back gate to the road where we were all in our pajamas and barefoot because it was a Sunday and we did not have any plans for the day. I felt someone's arms wrap around the side of my body to realize it was my neighbor Donna. What happened? I couldn't answer as I saw burned stuff coming out of my house. It was all too much to take in at the time. My neighbor Fred came up to me and hugged me too. I could see him crying and not knowing what was going on. Fred is like a second Krampus to us. A firefighter came up to me and asked if I lived in the house and if my name was Lillian. I said yes and went with him. He took me across the street. Watch out for the hose, he said as I looked down to see a giant yellow hose. I had heard somewhere that it was bad luck to step over a firefighter's hose, but that didn't matter at the time. He had taken me over to my neighbor's house where 2 police officers were standing. They were asking me how I thought the fire started. Before I could answer him, an EMT came over to me and asked me to follow him in the ambulance. I followed him back across the street. My feet hurt so badly it felt as if I had stepped on a billion mousetraps. Can you tell me your full name? He said. Lillian Rose Borelli, I said. The night before this happened, I was wondering, if I had a house fire, what would my escape route be? I had a feeling that this was going to happen, I told him as we arrived at the ambulance truck. I went in the ambulance and there was air conditioning going on and it felt very nice since it was very hot out. The EMT had put something around my arm to measure my heart pounding and my breathing. I was telling him about how I had a gut feeling until my family arrived. I saw my mom first and then my dad. My dad had breathed in a lot of smoke, so he had been breathing heavy and coughing. Ouch, why does it hurt so much? I said. The blood pressure cuff had been squeezing my arm really tight. It's squeezing because your blood pressure is high and you need to calm down. I tried controlling my breathing as the cuff felt looser. My parents were on the left side of the ambulance truck, and Arthur and Anthony were on the right-hand side. They had found Arthur, I thought. I was sitting on a chair in the back of the ambulance. The EMT had taken the cuff off my arm and asked me to sit next to my mom. I went and sat over to where she was sitting. She leaned over and whispered, "Everything is going to be all right." She hugged me really tight. Fred came over to the ambulance and asked if he could buy us dinner. My dad laughed and said that's not the top priority right now. My mom leaned over and whispered again. We were in an ambulance full of COVID-19 workers. I laughed a little, and it made me feel like it wasn't so bad after all, since she was making jokes. The EMT asked us if we wanted booties for our feet. We all said yes and put them on. I looked over at Arthur and thought, what happened? My older brother was sitting next to him with his long curly wet hair and seemed unbothered, but he's usually quiet, so I didn't know what he had done. I suddenly focused back into the conversation to hear that the EMTs and firefighters were worried about my dad's health, so he needed to go to the hospital, and everybody had to get out of the ambulance. Can I go over to Dustin's house to stay with Abby and Jacob? I asked my mom, who seemed very overwhelmed. Yes, please. I'm going over to Fred's house. I headed over to their house to look back at mine. I had seen firefighters carrying my parents' mattress and headboard. They were all burnt and were in terrible condition. I started to cry even more. I arrived at Dustin's house, and his wife had let me in and got me a glass of water. She led me to where Abby and Jacob had been. They had been playing with stuffed animals with a girl named Macy. They looked like they were having fun. They turned around to see me, and Abby started asking questions, but I did not want to answer them. Fire at Grandma's house, Jacob said, in a cute little voice while showing me a stuffed animal. I sat on the brown leather couch in the corner of her room. I drank my water. I didn't want to be in their house. I wanted to be outside to see everything, but I did not tell them. My dad had texted me. I have a bag in my nightstand with a hard drive and a bunch of memory sticks with pictures. Can't lose that. I knew that someone would take care of that, but at the time I could not. Macy asked us if we wanted to go outside in the backyard and chalk. Jacob was all for it, so we went outside. I could see a fire truck over the fence. Macy's mom had been making us pizza, and she let us watch movies on her TV. We were in her house for almost an hour. I had remembered that my sister was at work not knowing about what had just happened, so I texted her. Within seconds, she calls me. Are you being for real, Lillian? I started to cry even worse. Monica, I'm being serious, crying over the phone. I'm at break and I'm really going to start crying. Please tell someone to come pick me up. I sent her a picture of the fire truck in front of our house. She texted back and was asking about what had happened and if everything was okay. I told her what had happened and texted my mom asking if I could come over to where she was. She said yes and told me to bring Abby and Jacob over to where she was. I went over to the next house where my mom and brothers were. My neighbor Fred had been on his way to pick up my sister from her work, and Anthony had went with him. I went over to where my mom was standing. She had been standing with Fred's wife, Wanda, and they were talking about the house, and then Wanda says, Oh great, Child Protective Services is going to take your children, and the police are going to talk to the neighbors, and I'm going to tell them that you beat your children. It really broke the ice because it was funny, and we knew that she was being very sarcastic with us. She was a very sassy old Southern woman. Fred had arrived back, and I saw my sister, and she came up to me and Abby and gave us a really tight hug. While I was with my mom, she had told me that she was in the backyard looking through a window. My parents had Anthony go up on the roof and try to put out the fire. Anthony was on the roof with the hose. Luckily, my mom's window had been opened just a little so we could get water in her room. My dad had gone in the front yard while my mom was supervising him. My brother has long curly hair like Jesus, so till this day we call him Firefighter Jesus. It's a little joke with our family. My aunt had arrived, and it was about 4 hours after the fire, and there was one fire truck, and the fire chief was still there. She wanted to know if everything was okay. We were finally allowed back into our house after a long time of waiting. You can go in, but you need to take precautions, and don't touch anything, the fire chief said. Me and Abby went upstairs and went into our room. It was all black and looked like a dungeon. It was terrifying. Everything was scattered, and there were clothes and pillows stuffing everywhere. The walls were black, and there was holes in the ceiling. How did it go from a small pillow fire to this? My jaw dropped. It was so scary to look at, and the smell of soot was horrible. I went downstairs and went into the kitchen, and there were pictures all over the counter to dry. That was a very sad scene because we saw all the memories from the firemen that they had saved. I noticed that the toast was still in the toaster my mom was making for Jacob. My aunt was still over at our house and was talking to my mom. My cousins were also keeping us company. We were all on our driveway just sitting and afraid to go inside. My brother Nick called me and asking what had happened. I could not answer him, so I went to give my mom the phone. At the same time, my aunt got a text from my dad. Your father is ready to be picked up, she told us. My mom was busy on the phone, so my aunt was the only one who could go and pick him up. Who wants to come with me? I said I do, but my sister begged me not to go because it would make me feel worse, but I wanted to know if my dad was in good condition. We drove all the way to St. Alphonsus. On the way there, my aunt was telling me that this is a life lesson and things can only get better from now on. I really took this into consideration because I am very on a high alert and I was hoping for the better. We arrived at the hospital and we went to the emergency room parking lot. I saw my dad sitting on a chair through a large glass window. I got out of the car still in pajamas and walked up to a lady wearing a mask. I'm here to pick up my dad. And what's his name? She asked as I could see my dad walking up from behind her. Rick Burley, but he's right there. Oh, perfect timing. You're good to go. I got back in the car and looked at my dad, and his face and arms were covered in soot. His voice sounded like a squeaky balloon, and he was coughing a lot. He looked back at me and asked me if I went upstairs and saw the room, and if it was bad. I told him it was horrifying and scary. Did they get the flash drives out of my dresser, he asked. I'm not sure, but they told us not to touch anything. While we were driving, it felt so weird because nobody else knew that we had a house fire, and it felt as if we were in a bubble of our own sadness. We got back to the house and saw our family on the front lawn. My aunt stayed with us for a little while longer and then left. Our house felt completely empty. Nobody was talking or having fun. We just sat in different spaces. By now it was 8 or 9 p.m. and we had someone book us a hotel to stay at for a couple nights. We had a limited choice on what to bring with us because our clothes had to be washed with vinegar before we wore them, and most of our stuff was covered in soot. We got all this stuff and left to the hotel. This was the first time we had stayed at a hotel in the same city, so it was a bit weird. We got to the hotel and we played board games and watched movies until we waited in line to take showers. Everybody was covered in soot and dirt. A shower was needed for each of us. That's how we ended off the night. 5 months later, we are back in the house and everything is almost put back together. We had stayed at a different hotel than the first one. We stayed there every night until Halloween night. It was crowded since there was 7 of us, but we made it work. My parents' room got it the most, so their room looks completely different. We also redid the upstairs hallway and bathroom. We are currently working on the stairs. This experience has made me a stronger, more resilient person for many different reasons, but because I will always have my family by my side through the ups and downs, it made it seem it was better to go through since I was not alone in the process. This experience changed me for the better because now I know what the consequences are and how to handle things like this in the future. The most important thing I learned from this experience is no matter what it is, it's always better together.